There you go.
Okie doke.
Now it's a little better on my little bitty phone.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about palms and palm maintenance for the coastal bend. You might recognize these trees from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They're really beautiful. Look how nice and green and shiny they are. This must have been soon after a rain to have the leaves look so vibrant. Anyway, this is what we hope to see when we're thinking of palm trees. So I'll be talking about a few different species, about how to plant, mulching, fertilizing, pruning, insects, and disease. Trying to cover the gamut there. So first, I wanted to talk about our native palm. Did you know that we have some native palms? Can't hear you. Okay. Yes, now I hear you. Okay, so don't worry, I'm just kidding. So the sable palm is our native, the only native palm. There's a few different species, but sable is the genus as well as being sort of the common name. It's also called the Texas palmetto, Mexican palmetto. And these trees are slow growing, but they can get really tall to 50 feet or more. If you have been to the Palm Sanctuary in Brownsville, you'll know what I mean. And if you get a chance to go there, I would totally recommend it. It's really cool. It's several acres of just pretty much just sable palms of all sizes. Because they are native, they are of course adapted to our alkaline soils, our weather. They can handle salt spray, drought, excessive water. It's the best palm to grow, and they're really beautiful. They have these big palm-shaped or fan-shaped leaves, and they don't have spines on the stalk, which makes them, to me, much more preferable than the Washingtonia palms. But they are fairly slow growing. That's their only downside to me. And there's one of them. It's a really pretty tree, and it's got the pretty boots where the fronds had been, where the fronds are cut off and that's left behind. I think that's really attractive the way that looks. Okay, the other, besides Sable texana or Sable mexicana, which is the big one, we also have Sable minor or dwarf palmetto, dwarf sable. It really doesn't grow much of a trunk. It only gets to about 9 feet tall. It can also handle growing in standing water. It can handle extensive droughts. When it does stand in water, it starts to form a trunk. And if you've ever dug up one of these things, it is a workout. It has a huge underground bulb and root. But again, very pretty. It can grow in full sun or in part sun. I've got one of these in front of my house. Excuse me. Another sable palm is the sable palmetto, or cabbage palm, it's called, Florida sable. This is the state tree of Florida. Again, no thorns on the leaf petiole. And the leaf petioles are longer. So the petiole, you know, is the stem that attaches to the, more or less the trunk, between the trunk and the leaf blade. So those are really long on this palm. And so it gives it more of a sort of a weeping look to it. And these can get to 80 feet tall. Okay, then moving on to the queen palm. So all the rest of these palms are not native to Texas, but they're pretty well adapted. You can see the queen palm there in the snow that Corpus Christi got. I got this picture off the internet, but it was, I think, 2004. It was before I came to Texas. It has a really nice shape. Instead of having the fan-shaped leaf, this has more of a feather-shaped leaf. I'm assuming you've talked about this already. That's the two main leaf types on palms. So it has this very graceful look to it. These can get pretty tall, again, to 50 feet. They are cold tolerant. They are fairly drought tolerant, not as much as a sable, and somewhat salt tolerant. Okay, and then going to our Washingtonias, or what we just call our fan palms, our California and our Mexican fan palms. There's also Chinese fan palms. I'm sure there's a lot of different fan palms, but California and Mexican are the two main ones here. And these grow 40 to 60 feet tall. The Californians get a fatter trunk than the Mexican fan palm. These do not tolerate standing water or poor drainage. They really need to have excellent drainage, but they can handle salty soil and sea spray. And again, they can handle our alkaline soils and are relatively cold tolerant. Definitely tolerant of the conditions that we get in the winter. Okay, then the Mexican fan palm, another species of the Washingtonia. Also very tall. These and the California fan palm have those wicked thorns on the petiole. And these get tall and skinny. Canary Island date palm is another, I think, really beautiful palm. These are growing in Rockport, or in Fulton, actually, right across from the beach, so they can handle salt spray and salty soil. They would probably look a little better if they didn't have salt spray on them, but they can handle it. Just a beautiful palm. And then the Mediterranean fan palm, or Mediterranean palm, I see this one mostly just around commercial buildings, occasionally at residences. It's another pretty one, unless it's over pruned. And the foxtail palm, this is an attractive palm, but it's not as adapted to our area. When I came here in 2010, there was a pretty hard freeze, and everybody said, "Oh, it never gets this cold here. You know, don't worry. This is unusual." Well, the next year it froze again like that. And coming from Hawaii, I was wimpier than I am now about cold weather. But anyway, there were quite a few foxtail palms in our county, but they mostly died off in those freezes. So they are not freeze tolerant, and I hardly see these around now. Okay, so when is a palm not a palm? That's when it's a sago palm, which is not a palm, although almost everybody calls it sago palm. It's actually a cycad. It's in a whole different genus and a whole different family, but it has a leaf that looks like a palm, and it has a trunk, so we call it sago palm. And then a ponytail palm, I don't know why we call this one a palm. It doesn't really look at all like a palm. It's got those long, skinny leaves. It's very succulent. It holds a lot of water in that bulb at the base. Very drought tolerant. And then a bottle palm. This is a palm I saw in Aransas Pass that I thought was super cool, so I took a picture of it. So those are just a few of the palms that you're likely to see in our landscapes as master gardeners, or have people calling you with questions about them. Oh, and then these are some kind of cool palms that live in Rockport only. Okay, so what's different about palms? Well, trees are trees and palms are palms, right? Palms are not trees. They're not built the same. So what's the difference? Are you thinking about that? Okay, one is a dicot and one is a monocot. That is the big difference, right, between trees and palms. So the vascular bundles are, in a palm, they're scattered around like they are in a grass. But in a tree, they, of course, are around the perimeter, like in this picture. So on the right is a regular tree, and on the left is a palm tree. And you can see the difference in these great cross sections. Also, most palm trees, not all of them, but most of them have a single crown. So once that dies, the plant is dead. Once that gets cut or it gets broken off, that brand new leaf sheath gets broken off, that's the end of it. Whereas most trees, you know, you can top them and they won't look good, but they're mostly still going to live through that. And here's an example of a palm tree that got broken off soon after planting, and unfortunately it's history. These are beautiful palms, sable palms in front of a house that was restored in Rockport. Okay, planting is different too, because most palms are subtropical or tropical, except for our sable palms, which I suppose could be considered subtropical. But because of that, spring and summer is going to be the best time to plant as opposed to trees. You know, we plant those in the fall. So we want them to establish their roots and grow well during the fall and winter, and then be ready for the next spring and especially the summer. But palm roots are not going to grow when the temperature is below 65, the soil temperature. They will just sit there. So if they're planted in the winter, they're just going to sit there. And if it's rainy and conditions are right for pathogens, you might get some sort of a root or butt rot with palms. So that's why we plant them in the spring and summer. They want that warm soil and air temperature to develop and to grow their roots. Another thing that's different is if palms are dug up from the ground, almost all the roots are going to die back. Doesn't mean the palm is going to die, but most of the roots are going to die back, depending on the species. It's not true if you transplant a potted palm into the ground or into a larger pot, just if you dig them up. So just something to be aware of. So it's going to have, if you dig up a palm and then plant it in the ground, it's going to have very few roots to go on. It's going to have to grow all of them. And they all come from this root initiation zone, which is sort of an inverted cone shape tissue at the bottom of the trunk. And you can see how all those roots in this picture are growing from around the edge of the trunk. So it's not like a regular tree where you have, you know, a taproot and then branching roots off of that, the taproot and branching roots off of those. All the palm roots start right at the trunk.
So Ginger, we have a clarification question then, that it's better if you're buying a new palm, it's better to buy one that's in a pot than to dig one up, correct?
Yes, I would say that's better. You'll have a much easier transplant and establishment.
And I thank you for this because I had said in a previous presentation, don't transplant palms, they don't like it. Now I know why.
Well, good. Any other questions at this point?
That was the only one.
Okie doke. And we will go on to what we need to think about before planting besides the temperature and the time of year. And that would be the light requirement, the drainage, and the space. And is there space, you know, above ground for when the palm grows to its full size, as well as space for the roots? And you can see that these palms are being challenged both ways, I'd say. Obviously, they're growing outward towards the sunlight. Not necessarily that they don't have enough space yet, although they are going to grow into that roof, but they are leaning because they're growing towards the sun. And then if you can see at the base of this middle one that doesn't look like there's much of an area for the roots to grow. Most palms are going to require full sunlight and really good drainage. So here's to give you an idea, just a relative idea about size. This is 70 feet, this palm tree. That is massive. Even 40 feet is pretty dang big. Look over here on the far left, there's Kevin standing right there. about 6 feet tall. We can say that, right? He's about 6 feet tall, this guy. And look at the medium trees, 20 to 40 feet. This tree at the front is 20 feet. You know, that's more than twice as big as a adult person. So when we're talking about 60, 70, 80 feet, that is huge. And of course, palms don't need as much area for their root zone as a tree does, but they still need to have some space to grow. Okay, so when you're ready to plant, you want to dig the hole to the proper depth. You do not want the plant deeper than it was in the pot or wherever it was previously growing. You want it to be at the same depth. You might need to dig the hole wider than it was, depending on the soil. And I know a lot of the soil in Nueces County is different than our sandy soil that we have primarily in Aransas County. So if you need to, make it about twice as wide if you need to loosen the soil. So palm tree doesn't have a root flare exactly like a regular tree has, but it can get sort of a swollen area at the base where the root initiation zone is. And you never want to cover that up with soil. It's always better to plant a little higher than a little too deeply. The plant can handle that better. And of course, there's probably going to be some settling. When you dig your hole, you need to tamp down the bottom of the hole before you plant the palm. And you may want to water the bottom of your hole to settle the soil and also just to make sure the drainage is good. Okay, and then after you finish planting, you want to water. You may have heard this from Bill Green. I think this is a great way to remember how often to water a newly planted tree or shrub. The 1-2-3-3-2-1 method. So in the first month, you're going to water about 3 times a week. And you're going to water thoroughly. Every time you water, you should water thoroughly because you want the soil to be wet down below where the roots are right now, because you want the roots to grow into that. You want the roots to grow deeper, and they're not going to grow down deeper if the soil's dry. They're only going to grow into moist soil. Okay, so first month, 3 times a week. Second month after planting, 2 times a week. And the third month, just 1 time a week. And of course, that's a generalization, but it's going to depend on wind and sunlight and heat and how sheltered from the wind your plant is, and your soil type, and any number of other things. But this is a good general rule. And then after the plant is established, after about the 3rd month, unless the 3rd month is July or August, then you can probably water 1 to 2 times a month for April to October, and then cut that back to just once a month, November to March. And I see way more plant problems from plants that are overwatered. And by that I mean watered too frequently, than plants that are underwatered. So if you're in doubt, don't water it, wait another day. But when you do water, water thoroughly. And especially, you know, as the tree or palm or shrub matures and the root zone is bigger and bigger, you really want to wet as much of that area as you can, the width and also the depth. Okay, and then you want to add a layer of mulch. And it should be several inches deep. Organic material like wood chips is great. There might be some inorganic mulches that would be favorable, although I can't think of any right now. I would stay away from ground up rubber tires. I would avoid rocks, not because it's a bad thing to add to the soil, but just because they can get really hot here. So organic mulch really has a lot of benefits. as it decomposes, of course, it adds organic matter to the soil, which increases both the water holding capacity and the nutrient holding capacity of the soil. And if you have a clay soil, it also kind of breaks it up a little bit, improves the aeration and the drainage. But of course, you do have to keep replacing organic mulch as it decomposes. So maybe every 6 months to a year. And you want to keep it at least 6 inches away from the trunk. You don't want it touching the trunk because it is going to be moist. It holds a lot of moisture. You don't want that moisture touching the trunk all the time because it's going to start causing rot. And also as it breaks down, it may generate heat, which is going to be like a double whammy on the trunk. So keep it at least 6 inches away. Oh, did I mention you should keep it away from the trunk? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so what are some of the purposes of mulch? You can just call them out in your head.
Retaining moisture.
All right. That's a big one, isn't it?
Sorry, that wasn't in my head.
Oh, shoot, I thought I was reading your mind. Okay, moisture retention is a huge one. It can make a tremendous difference for plants in the ground as well as plants in pots, especially in our summers. Weed control can also make a big difference in reducing weed growth, probably not complete control. Mulch moderates the soil temperature. So in the summer, it might keep it a little bit cooler, and in the winter, keep it a little bit warmer. Adding organic matter, as I already talked about, improving the soil that way, which helps the plants to grow better. And what about trunk rotting? No, we don't want it to do trunk rotting. That's not one of the purposes. So we want to keep it away from the trunk. And you can see in this picture, I hope, that the bark that is below the ground, this is not a palm tree, this is actually a coffee tree. The bark is rotting underneath there, underneath the ground. This is like an inch or so too deep. So it's really important to keep that mulch away from the trunk and also not to plant it too deep. And that's true for anything that gets woody, including shrubs, not so much for annuals, but for everything perennial. And we don't want to be volcano mulchers. This seems to be a fad for the last 10 or so years. And as master gardeners, I think you want to tell people that even, I'm sure people are trying to do the best thing for the tree and they think they're going to hold in a lot of moisture with mulch that thick, which they are, but they're going to be holding too much moisture against the trunk. So it's good to let people know, if they're interested, that they need to pull that mulch away from the trunk and let it breathe. Okay, and this is what we want to have when we plant a palm as well as a regular tree. You want the bottom of the root ball on firm soil. You want a layer of mulch about 2 to 4 inches deep away from the trunk. And then you can build up a soil ring about 12 inches out from the trunk to sort of retain the water. We used to put plants down into a little depression to concentrate the water, but now we know that that is not good for their trunks. And so you want the soil level around the tree, but then you can build up a little moat or a little berm around the edge to concentrate the water in that area. And you're going to backfill your hole with the original soil. That is the soil that the palm has to grow in. You can't amend all the soil that the roots are going to go into. You can amend maybe you can amend a vegetable bed or a flower bed. You can kind of change the soil there that the roots are going to go into, but for a tree or a palm or something that is going to get big, you just can't amend enough of the soil to make a difference. So that is the soil it needs to be in. That's the soil it's going to be in. I mean, so it's a soil it needs to kind of basically be used to. And I got this graphic from the Texas Forest Service. They have this great website, texastreeplanting.tamu.edu. Like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, the Texas Forest Service is associated closely with Texas A&M. So that's why the website is tam.edu, tamu.edu. And it has a lot of tips on planting, on sizes of trees, locating them around your house. It's got really great graphics. And then it has the Texas Tree Locator, which if we have time, I'll show you later, but you can put in your county, how much size you have, whether you want deciduous or evergreen, all kinds of different things, and it will come up with a list of plants that would grow well in your area. Okay, another difference about between trees and palms is that palms require more potassium, more magnesium, and more minor nutrients. So for regular trees, we might go with a 2-1-1 or 3-1-1 ratio fertilizer, but with palms, we need a 2-1-3 or a 3-1-3 plus magnesium and micronutrients at least once a year. We want to have those micronutrients. And here is just that fertilizer. So you can see 12-4-12. This is a 3-1-3 ratio, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then it has some calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and you can see these are all in fairly large amounts. Calcium's 2.75, magnesium 5%, sulfur 8%. Those are all major nutrients, as well as the NPK. And then it goes into the minor nutrients, which you can see are in much smaller amounts. So copper, iron, manganese, and zinc. And then it tells what it is derived from, what the fertilizer is derived from, and how much to add. So this is just a very generalized recommendation for established palms. You might need to add 1/2 to 2 pounds per application.
Ginger, we have a question. Would you still use this kind of fertilizer for the other things that are called palms but are not true palms?
Like the bottle palm?
Like the ponytail palm or a dragon palm, which is actually a Dracaena.
Beth, that was a joke. Remember the bottle palm?
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Okay. You really don't need to use this type of fertilizer for those plants that aren't truly palms. I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt them, but it's not necessary.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so again, this is just generalized recommendations, and you can see for a large palm, like a royal palm, it's a lot of fertilizer, 5 to 7 pounds times 3 times a year. Most of the palms that I see around Aransas and Nueces County are lacking nutrients, and that's because they are not the native palms. The sable palms look great, but the other palms almost always are lacking nutrients. Okay, we always want to look for a slow release fertilizer, or one that at least has a large percentage of the nutrients in a slow release form. You need to have it in good contact with the soil, either scratched in or just watered in. And the best time to apply that would be in the spring and summer, when the palms are actively growing. And it's better environmentally to use a slow release fertilizer because you have less leaching. So just what is it that those numbers stand for? Do you remember? Okay, the first one's always nitrogen, second one's always phosphorus, and the third one's always potassium. Even if it doesn't have one of these three, it'll still have the three numbers. If it doesn't have phosphorus, it might be like 1806. It's always going to have three numbers though, and it's always going to be N, P, and K. And then after the N, P, and K, it's going to list the other nutrients like calcium, iron, magnesium, and it should be telling you what percentage of it is slow release. So hopefully you can see on this slide, it tells what it's derived from: polymer coated urea, sulfur coated urea. I know that these are both slow release.
Ginger, with the knowledge of it being NPK, we're asking for a review. Could you go back to the slide that shows the palm fertilizer to see the main analysis?
So this one,
Yep.
it says 12-4-12. So 12% nitrogen, 4% phosphorus, and 12% potassium or potash.
It's because you said it needs extra potassium and it's a grass, so it needs nitrogen.
Yeah, pretty much. And it needs magnesium.
Right. One of the local nurseries told me they need manganese and magnesium, and I give mine Lipton tea because that's where most humans get their manganese from. This drinking tea.
Really?
Eating
I didn't know there
nuts.
was manganese in tea.
Yeah, 25% of USRDA in 1 cup of
Right.
tea.
Well,
That's black tea, not the herbal.
the tea is for palms also. And actually, I think I have
Another
that.
question:
Yeah.
does the high sulfur offset the salt tolerance? I'm not sure if I said that right. I'm double checking. Is the high sulfur to offset the salt tolerance?
No, I don't think so. I've
From
never.
a molecular, go ahead, Ginger.
Oh, I was just going to say I've never heard that.
Yeah, from a molecular biology point of view, sulfur is to create disulfide bridges in proteins, and for plants, proteins are used to create enzymes that facilitate plant communication and the functions within the plant. So I would think it's just that they have more complexity of their enzyme structure and they just need more sulfur for making those proteins.
That's what I think too. That sounds good. Okay, so
I didn't understand molecular biology till I was in my 30s, but unfortunately now I do.
I'm not quite 30, so I can't understand it yet. Okay, so this fertilizer, which is not a palm fertilizer, it's 24-6-12, right? So it is a 4:1:2 ratio. But I put this picture up because it shows that it contains 16.3% of slowly available coated slow release nitrogen from 3 different components. So it should tell that. You should be able to find the percentage of slow release, and of course the higher the better. Fertilizer can be organic, conventional, or natural, which natural might not necessarily be organic. Compost can be used as fertilizer. It has lots of different nutrients, a lot of minor nutrients, and they're all in small amounts, so which is good and bad. You know, it's palm trees might need more, but it's not going to burn, and as I said, it's gonna they're going to be applied in balance. And again, it's better to apply small amounts more frequently than large quantities infrequently. Better for the plant, better for the environment. Okay, this is just another another example of a type of fertilizer that's for lawns. This is a 3:1:2 ratio. And then here is a organic fertilizer. And as I said, just because it's natural doesn't necessarily mean it's organic. There's a lot of things that go into that, including how something is mined, how something is processed, how the products are processed into the fertilizer. But if it has this OMRI seal down on the bottom right, that circular seal on the living organic fertilizer, then you can be sure that it is an organic product. So if that's what you want, you need to look for either the OMRI certification, or there's this one also has this kosher organics, but some sort of a certification that it actually is organic. And you can see this one, the living organic fertilizer is basically a 1:1:1 fertilizer and low amounts. And then there's also ironite, which is 7:01. This is a liquid. Whoops. It's just nitrogen with a teeny bit of potassium and then iron. And you put this on the leaves. It's a foliar feed. So regardless of the pH of the soil or the conditions of the roots or the amount of moisture in the soil, the plant can take this up through the leaves, and it will usually green up pretty quickly. Okay, so we're back to this one, and I didn't point out that this one said it's a 3 to 4 month slow release. Often slow release fertilizers do not last as many months in Texas as they might in other states because of our heat. A lot of them are released with warmer weather. They're released more rapidly, so it's just something to keep in mind.
Okay, now I have a question. With the heat, does a lot of the nitrogen get released as ammonia into the atmosphere instead of into the soil?
Oh, good question. The reason that you always want to either apply fertilizer to wet soil or water lightly after fertilizing is so the nitrogen does not get released into the air, at least not much of it. You want to water it so that the fertilizer gets down maybe a couple inches into the ground. So 1/2 inch to 1 inch of water needs to be applied. So that that nitrogen doesn't volatilize and go up in the air, cause it's not good for environmentally, and the plant is not going to be able to use it. I did mention the OMRI seal already, but not what it stands for. It's Organic Materials Review Institute, and this is a board that's made up of people from farming and all kinds of industry and academics, and they consider different products that want OMRI certification to decide if they should have it or not. It's also a website you can look at to find products that would be sources of, say, you wanted potassium, an organic potassium. You can go to the OMRI website and find sources of organic potassium. It's a great website. Okay, so you want to distribute the fertilizer from about 1 foot from the trunk to beyond the drip zone. You don't want it touching the trunk, and you don't want it real close to the trunk because there's just not roots there that are going to pick it up. Oh yeah, and don't fertilize the driveway. It's not going to make it grow. Water it into about 4 inches deep, and make sure that when you're applying fertilizer, this wouldn't be so much to palms probably as it is to grass, that you're not, overthrowing it or whatever and getting it onto concrete areas. If you do accidentally, just sweep it into the yard before you water. We do not want that nitrogen going into the bays and estuaries or the other nutrients. And that's exactly where it's going to go. Okay, so here's a chart that I find very useful. You may have seen this when you had your soils class, but this shows the relative availability of different nutrients at different pHs. So what is, can one of you say what your soil pH is? Anybody had a soil test?
Not yet.
Okay,
Mine's 8.3, Ginger.
8.3. Okay, can you see my pointer arrow? My cursor?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're in the 8, it's just, okay, there it is. We're 8.3 is right here, right? So we can see that nitrogen is quite available. Phosphorus is becoming less available than it was at a little bit lower pH. Potassium is very available, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and molybdenum. These are all very available at a pH of 8.3, but iron, manganese, boron, copper, and zinc are not very available at all at a high pH. So in general, we can say that the major nutrients are available, quite available at a high pH, and the minor nutrients are very lowly available at a high pH in general. Just as a way to kind of remember it. Excuse me, and this is the reason that we have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies in our soil, because the pH is so high. And in this case, the minor nutrients might need to be applied foliarly in order for the plant to take it up. Like ironite would be an example of a foliar iron fertilizer.
I was expecting to have iron issues, but I accidentally discovered that manganese deficiency resembles a thrift infestation.
Oh, dang. So was that crinkling of the leaf or something like that?
It was the flowers of gillyflower or stock. They
Mhm.
looked horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of nutrient deficiencies can look like insect problems or diseases, and vice versa. It can be tricky to figure them out sometimes. But anyway, you can find this chart on the internet. Just look up pH, soil pH, and availability of nutrients or something like that. It's, as I said, very useful, I think. Okay, so potassium deficiency. This is the main and most common deficiency of in palms. And the symptoms for potassium deficiency always show up on the oldest leaves. And then as it gets worse, they kind of move up to the younger and younger leaves. So the growing tip really needs the potassium, and it kind of sucks it up to itself and sucks it out of the other leaves. So you can see that this plant is pretty nice and green here at the growing tip, but it's very pale down here on the older leaves. That's very typical of potassium deficiency on palms. And after you see these pictures, you drive around and look, you're going to see this all over the place. Especially, it's very common on the fan palm. So what it really is little spots that are yellowish orange and kind of translucent. So if you hold the leaf up to the sun, you can see that it's actually a bunch of little spots. But then as there's more and more of them, they coalesce, and pretty soon it looks like the whole leaf is yellow, as it looks in this picture. Okay, it's most severe in Mexican fan palm, queen palms, date palms, and here's the Canary Island date palm, and the pygmy dates or dwarf Robelenii, very common on those. But high levels of potassium can cause a magnesium deficiency. So you need to use a fertilizer that has both nutrients, and that's why it's it's a really good idea to use one of those fertilizers that is formulated particularly for palms. But it's fine to use those on other plants, but I would specifically use, if for palms, I would specifically use those. And you can see again on this plant that the new growth looks pretty good. It's pretty green compared to the older growth. So that's a sign that it's potassium deficiency. And here it is on the Phoenix palm or dwarf date palm. It's very severe in this case on the right. And then the picture of what it should be looking like. Okay, when it gets really severe, the leaves can be greatly reduced, and it can actually kill the palm if it's really severe, or if people start cutting off those older leaves that are still photosynthesizing. You can also get what's called pencil pointing, where the trunk diameter gets smaller and smaller. And this is just to compare the potassium deficiency on the left side, sorry, on the right side, with nitrogen deficiency on the left side. So you can see that the palm on the left side is kind of overall pale green, kind of sickly looking, whereas this one on the right that we already saw in the previous picture, it's just the older leaves that look yellow. Okay, before I go on to pruning, are there any questions about nutrients or fertilizer or anything else I've talked about?
Is there a particular nutrient deficiency that would cause only the new growth to be yellow?
I would say that is likely nitrogen, and it just hasn't maybe gotten to the rest of the you know, it will get more severe, and pretty soon the whole plant would look pale.
And another question we have is, thank you, and do iron and nitrogen deficiencies look very different?
Iron and nitrogen. From a distance they might, because they will both look pale, but as you get closer, you'll see that on a nitrogen deficiency, the entire leaf will be pale, whereas on an iron deficiency, the veins will stay green, and between the veins, it will be pale. And often with iron, or I think with iron, I mean, it's going to be more on the youngest growth, whereas nitrogen will be the whole plant. Any others?
Just a comment that you're like having Dr. House, but for plants.
Is that good? Because he was kind of weird.
He was kind of mean, but he was also brilliant. So.
Well, I'm kind of brilliant, but I'm also mean. So.
Smarty plants was the last comment. All right.
I like
Getting
it.
on with it.
Yes, moving on. So pruning palms. These palm trees used to be, or yes, they used to be across from our old office. And I think for a long time, the same people owned this building, and then they sold it. And also we had a hurricane, but it was more that new owners came and they decided to prune these palms. And actually one of them died because of the pruning. But this is how we want the palms to look when they're pruned. We want this whole ball of leaves. It's kind of like a lollipop, you know, it's a whole circle of leaves. This is the natural form, natural shape of palms.
Like the truffle of trees in Dr. Seuss.
Yes, exactly like that. Okay, there are some reasons to prune palms, but if I'm around, you better make sure you got the right reasons. You might need to prune them to prune off the dead leaves to remove hiding places for varmints like rats, centipedes, cockroaches. I mean, if it's close to your house, you might need to do that. If it's not close, I don't think there's any need to. There's not a problem as far as the plant is concerned with taking off these dried leaves that are hanging down. It's always fine to cut off a dead leaf. But it's not necessary for the plant's health. And so it becomes just a personal preference. You might need to prune if it's a hazard for people, either that they might drop, the fronds might drop on people, or, you know, it's a sight issue where you can't see around it to see traffic or whatever. Lots of times people will remove the flowers or the seeds because they can be a hazard to walk on. And then with tall palms, you might need to do some pruning so that leaves don't fall and land on utility lines or on structures or whatever. But otherwise, there's really no reason to prune palms. It's not something they need routinely. So don't prune unless you need to, and never prune off green or even part green fronds because they need every bit of that leaf area to photosynthesize. If you think about a palm compared to a tree, palms have a very small amount of leaf area. And I don't know what possessed the people that pruned these palms in Fulton about a month ago. I mean, I'm sure they were just trying to do the right thing and didn't know, but look at these pitiful things. They hardly have any leaves to photosynthesize. If you do have to prune a palm for some reason, then you never want to go past the horizontal. So that means instead of having a full circle, you would have a half circle of leaves. So if these trees had been pruned just to the horizontal, they would have about, I don't know, 10 times as many leaves as they have now. There's just no reason to do this. And these trees aren't even that high that they had to hire a lift or anything to do it. You can probably tell that bothers me. So it's better not to remove any fronds unless they're dead or dying. Don't remove them just because they're drooping if they're still green. So what we want again is the one on the left, that's the whole circle. The one on the right, it's not super severe like the previous picture I showed, but it's still past the horizontal. It's more like a V shape on the top there. It's not a half moon. It drains the nutrients from the tree. So if you have a tree that's already potassium deficient, which you probably do, because like I said, that's so common here on palms, then it makes it even worse, makes that deficiency even worse, because as I said, the potassium is going to be pulled from the older leaves first. So if all the older leaves get cut off, it's going to be pulled from the newer leaves, because that's all there is. And it also opens up the canopy to wind and cold and exposes that that leaf that's coming out of the crown. It exposes the crown to the wind, and if that new leaf gets snapped off, then the crown is dead and the plant is done for. Okay, again, here's what we want, the natural round shape. Oh, look, Rockport. But it's fine to leave the dry ones. Okay, this is what we want to see. Pretty much, this is a little bit more severe than it needed to be, but this is what we do not want to see. And this is what they do every year to these very palms. And it doesn't even look good. They look totally out of balance. Okay, this is what we want to see. This is what we don't want to see. It stresses them out. And then there's the question of when you're pruning, where do you cut it? You want to cut it fairly close to the trunk, but not too close and definitely not flush. You want to leave a little bit of a stub, which is called a boot. You don't want to cut into the trunk at all or expose the tissue under that boot. Once those dry off, you can peel them off. If they peel off pretty easily, it's fine to peel them off, but don't be shaving them off. So this one, you know, it's left kind of long. Again, it's partly just personal preference, but I think it looks better when it's pruned a little bit closer. And in the far right, it looks like they have shaved this part of the trunk that they pruned fairly recently. So that exposes it to insect and disease infestation because it's open. This is, you know, a beautiful sable palm on the left here that it's in its natural state pretty much. Said that already. Saw that already, sorry. And then Beth, this is for you. I just wanted to show everybody a few pictures of my yard and my palm trees. Beth, are you paying attention? Okay, I guess not. Are there any?
Yes, I was. I was just checking. There was a comment. Someone said, "Wow, are they all that way?" But I'm not sure what they were referring to.
She was talking about those tiny little palm trees with the tiny heads.
Oh.
Yeah, unfortunately,
yeah.
we see this way too often.
I interrupted some people doing this downtown during the last Home and Garden show. So that was in February. And they told me they were mandated by the city to overprune because they're contracted to do it like every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And it's to keep the rachis from the palm PDO from falling in the street and causing tire punctures. So they're trying to do it to minimize cost.
Yes, I can, you know, I understand that's an issue with these big, tall trees where you have to have a lift to get to them, a big lift for
And
these.
I expressed that if the tree falls in the road because it's too weak by the way they're pruning it, that's a bigger problem.
That was an excellent point. Excellent. Also, there's no research supporting the idea that removing the live green fronds reduces future pruning requirements. So they're really, it's something that landscape departments or city maintenance departments need to learn about, I'd say. They just don't realize, but they look awful, don't they? They look so sad, and they are. Okay, shall we move on to insects, or are there any other questions?
Just a comment that they usually request a 10 and 2 cutting so that they don't have to cut them on this that often. And I will attest this was not a 10 and 2. This was a pencil point.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Yeah. But I think even the 10 and 2, it's actually doesn't prove to save money. There's no, you know, there's no evidence that that saves, but that's what they're trying to do. Okay, so moving on to insects of palms. With insects and diseases, the best defense is a strong offense. Plants that are stressed for whatever reason are going to be more attractive to insects. They often put out hormones that insects are attracted to, and you know, if they're stressed, they also are more susceptible to disease infestation. So proper watering is a huge cultural practice that makes a tremendous difference. Fertilizing, not over pruning, also having the right plant for the spot, not trying to stuff a big tree into a small area, making sure there's enough sunlight. Also checking your plants for pests so that if you do get an infestation, you can take action early, and look for the good guys and maybe plant things like flowers to attract the beneficial insects. Okay, here's what we need in order to see. I like the little lenses, the jeweler's loops or whatever they're called, as opposed to a magnifying glass. Excuse me. They're just easier for me to see with. And you hold the loop close to your eye, and then you move the plant closer or farther in order to focus it. And they're very effective. You can have these ones with multiple lenses to get more magnification. But this makes a huge difference in telling if something is an insect versus maybe an insect dropping or just a spot on the leaf. And these are easy to carry around. You can put these on your keychain even. Okay, you ready for a pop quiz? Okay, good. What percentage of bugs in the world are plant pests? Hold up your hand if you think it's A. Okay, hold up your hand if you think it's B. Okay. Hold up your hand if you think it's C. And if you think it's D, you should hang your head. The real answer is A. All right. Just 4%, which I think is actually pretty surprising. So most of the bugs in the world that we come across, that we see, or even that we don't see, are not plant pests. So we need to remember that. And we need to know a little bit about these creatures so that we can know if they're a pest, and if they are a pest, know what to do about them, if anything. So first would be the difference between insects and mites or spiders. I'm pretty sure everybody knows this, but insects have 3 body parts: head, thorax, and abdomen, and they have 6 legs. And mites have 2 body parts, just a head and an abdomen, and 8 legs. So their life cycle differs, and therefore management measures will differ. They're also categorized by their mouth parts. And sometimes you don't see the insect, you just see the damage, but you can tell which type of a mouth part it has. So piercing, sucking, and chewing are like the 2 most common that cause problems with plants. There's also sponging mouth parts and siphoning. These are the 4 most common. But as I said, for plants, it's the first 2 that are really the problem. So piercing, sucking insects or mites have a like a stylet or a little needle that they insert into the leaf, and often they will put out an enzyme that'll break down the leaf tissues and liquefy them, and then they can suck it up. Some of them are also doing this, putting their stylet in caterpillars or other bugs, but this is how they feed. And then even with an insect that they're feeding on, they're going to inject an enzyme to break down the tissues so they can suck it up. So they're feeding on the inside of the leaf. They're not feeding on the surface. So insecticides that coat the leaf surface are not going to be effective. Systemics are generally effective. And mites have this type of mouth part. There are hundreds of species of mites, most like hot, dry weather. And sometimes there's webbing, sometimes there's not. They can be very small and hard to see. It's often recommended that if you can't see them and maybe you don't have a lens with you, you hold the leaf over a piece of plain white paper and shake it. And if there's mites on it, they'll drop down onto the plain white paper and be easier to see. They're often hiding on the undersides of leaves, not only mites, but a lot of different insects, because, you know, it's easier to get away with things if you're hidden. Maybe they're also protecting themselves from the elements, but definitely from predators. The nymphs or the young look just like the adults, but they're smaller. So they do not go through complete metamorphosis. And they leave leaves with this sucked appearance. You know, these leaves look like they've had the nutrients sucked out of them, right? So they get this stippled effect or sometimes a bronzing, and often the leaves are also crinkled or cupped. So a lot of times the mites will feed on a leaf when it's very young and small, and then they'll leave. They like those nice, soft, tender leaves. So they'll feed on them, and then as the leaf expands, it is cupped or distorted in some way. Okay, this is another type of sucking insect. This is a scale. This is very common on palms. And this is an insect that in its younger stages, it crawls around, and this young stage is called crawlers, finds a place that it wants to set up housekeeping, and then it builds a scale over itself as a protection. So once they build that scale, they don't move. They're kind of stuck there. They're also hard to get off. They're hard to treat because they do have that protective scale. So depending, there's hard scales and soft scales, and there are, again, hundreds of kinds of scales. But soft scales you can treat with soapy water, or maybe even blast them off with a hose, or maybe a soap and oil mixture. Hard scales, you're probably going to need oil or possibly even a systemic to get rid of them. And sometimes there's predators, and you don't really need to do anything, but just keep an eye on it. So after they suck the juices out of the plant, they exude this sweet stuff that it's excrement, but we call it's sweet and sticky because it's high in sugar, and we call it honeydew. And then black sooty mold, which is a fungus, grows on the honeydew. So the sooty mold doesn't actually infect the leaf. It just grows on the surface, but it does prevent the leaf from photosynthesizing. So you have a double whammy of the insect sucking nutrients out and the sooty mold cutting down on photosynthesis. So for a young plant, it can be a big problem. And as I said, these are not uncommon on palm trees, even though I've showed you pictures of a lot of other things also. And you can kind of see the insects on this, on the petioles of these leaves. So the cycad scale is one of these insects. Again, it's not a true palm, but this is super common. I'm sure you've probably seen this. It's killed a lot of cycads in Aransas County. There is a natural predator for it, but if it doesn't get controlled, it can really go rampant and kill the plant. And I find that it's mostly on plants that are overwatered. If you just ignore your cycads, maybe water them once every 4 to 6 weeks, you're probably not going to get this scale. They're definitely more attracted to stressed plants. It doesn't mean that insects won't attack a healthy plant, because they will, but they're more attracted to stressed plants. So if you do have a mite versus an insect, you might need to apply miticide. Not all insecticides will kill mites. If it's something like a soap or an oil where you're basically clogging up the breathing holes of the creature, then it doesn't really matter if it's an insect or a mite, because it's a mechanical type of control. But it's something to be aware of. Okay, another type of mouth part that is common on plant pests of palms is the chewing mouth part. And you know, we've all seen this. Grasshoppers and caterpillars are kind of the two of the main ones that have these kind of mouth parts that you can see the damage of, because they have large mouths and they eat a lot. They're hungry. So you see leaves with big bites taken out of them. And this is also not uncommon on palm trees. While the leaf is still folded up, often the eggs are inside there, are laid in there, and they hatch and they start feeding before the leaf has even unfurled. And as you can see in this picture, they can do some major damage. So you would, on a young palm, you would need to control this because they might eat most of the leaves. And you can use something like BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria that only affects caterpillars or caterpillar family, moths and butterfly larvae. And it's only going to affect the caterpillars that eat it. So it's not going to be affecting the caterpillar if you spray it on the caterpillar, only if the caterpillar eats it from the leaf. So you spray the leaves. So therefore also you're not going to get something like a monarch coming and feeding on a palm tree and getting this in them and killing them. And it's like a stomach poison basically when they eat it. But it does break down in sunlight, so you need to spray it late in the day so it has more time for the insect to be eating those leaves. And a lot of the caterpillars do feed at night. Was there a question? Okay.
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Sponging mouth parts, this is what flies have, and it's kind of gross. I mean, they're just like sort of rasping at it and again, injecting an enzyme that's going to break down the tissue so that they can lap it up. And siphoning, this is mostly what butterflies and moths have. Not really a plant pest too much. These are some of the good guys that are either predators or parasites. So the predators are going to actually eat the so-called bad bugs, and the parasites are going to do something like probably lay their eggs in the bad insect, and as the eggs hatch and the larvae come out, they're gonna eat that bad insect. It's kind of a nasty way to go, but that's what we do sometimes. So these are very common. Lacewings and lady beetles are very common, and damselflies. People recognize these as being good bugs. Maybe not so much the ground beetle, the assassin bug, and the robber fly. And here's some more good ones. This red wasp on the top left, those are pretty common. And if you watch them, you'll see that they are they're going around and feeding on flowers, but they're also going into the ground and, I don't know, looking for stuff to eat, I guess. The garden spider, which makes the zigzag in its web, on the top right there, that's an excellent predator. And a lot of the parasites or parasitoids, I mean, are very tiny wasps that do not hurt people at all. You probably are not even noticing them. They might look like a small fly to you because they are so small. And they are great parasites, especially of caterpillars. Here's some of the things that attract beneficial insects. Some of the flowers that you could plant around your palms, around your yard, anywhere. They're great pollinator plants also. So moonshine yarrow or dill, which both have a flower head that is kind of flat so they can land on it easily. And so for some insects, they want that. Coneflowers, they don't do that great here. Catmint, black-eyed Susans, and others that we call daisies, sage, fleabane, just about any flowering plants really, and having a variety of them that are going to be blooming at different times and attracting different insects is the best way to go. Okay, so in order to control a pest, you need to get it identified. And identifying an insect is only possible if you've got a good sample. Also, it might not even be a pest. It might just be an insect that's hanging out on your plant, but it's good to know that. So you want to collect collect the insect that you think is causing the damage and maybe put it in a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Don't smash it and put it on a piece of tape, because that makes it just makes it hard to identify it. If you can't find the insect, but you see damage, then collect samples of that, because sometimes that is enough to identify it, or at least get it narrowed down. And then you can bring the sample into the extension office. You need to keep it cool, or at least not sitting in a hot car for a long time. Or you can also just take a good close-up picture and bring it to the extension office, or if the entomologist that came and gave your IPM class, I don't know if she said you could send samples to her. Anyway, get it sent in so you can get it identified. Or you can go to this website, which I really like, because on the left here, you know, a lot of times you have no idea, and you go to a website or a key and you're trying to identify it. You have no idea what it is. You don't know where to start. But on this, you can go through these pictures here on the left and click on something that has a body shape that looks like the insect that you're trying to identify, and get it narrowed down and often identify it. So this bugguide.net is a great site that I would highly recommend. Is there a question? No?
No, not.
Okay. Okay. Well, are there any questions about insects? Okay, then we're going on to diseases of palms. Hopefully you learned in your plant pathology class about the disease triangle. So to have a disease, if it's a biotic disease, which is caused by a living pathogen, then you have to have the pathogen has to be present. You have to have a host that's susceptible to that pathogen, and you have to have an environment that is favorable for that pathogen to flourish and to develop the disease. So if you can control any one of those three, you can control the disease. There's also what's considered abiotic diseases by pathologists, and I think that's just because there's nowhere else to put these kind of things, and those are not caused by something living, but maybe caused by weather, like sunburn or wind damage or nutrient deficiencies. Those are classified as abiotic. Okay, and so here's some examples. Cold. This is Phoenix palm, and this is just cold damage when we had some severe, what I thought was severe winter weather. Here's a leaf spot. This is a biotic disease. So this is caused by one of many fungi that can cause leaf spots. This does kind of look like potassium deficiency on this palm, but because it has this yellow halo around it, and it's not really a translucent orange to yellow spot, but the yellow halo especially tells you that that's a fungus. And here's some more leaf spots. This doesn't, well, early stage, it's got a yellow halo around it here. And then as it develops and gets worse, that yellow halo turns into a black halo, and the tissue at the center is brown and dead. And we don't have a big problem with leaf spots in established palms. They are going to be more severe on plants with deficiencies. As I was saying before, you know, the best defense is a good offense. Plants that are deficient in any nutrient are just going to be more susceptible to disease. There's things you can do, practices, besides keeping your plants fertilized and watered, but not overwatered. If you do see diseased leaves, you pick those up and bag them up and send them away. Don't put them in your compost pile. Water early in the morning. If the leaves are going to get wet, if you're just watering the base, because you do not need to water the trunk, but if you're watering around it, it's not so important that you water in the morning, but anytime the leaves are getting wet, it's best to water in the morning. Keep in mind that any leaf injury is an opening for a pathogen. And you may need to use a fungicide if it's something that's severe. Fungicides are often not that effective unless it's very early in the disease development. So keep an eye on your plants. Here is a leaf spot that can cause problems on palms called false smut, caused by a fungus, and it causes these little, these brown spots that kind of stick up, and then they develop these yellow filaments that poke up. And it can get severe and look pretty nasty and cause some damage. As it says, it's more common on the phoenix palms, which would be both the dwarf phoenix and all the date palms are phoenix palms. So fungicides are only preventative. So they're not going to cure it, but they're going to keep the plant from getting infected. So this would be, if you had it in the area, if you'd seen it in the area or seen it on a few plants, you might want to spray the other plants nearby, cut off the leaves that have the disease spots on them. Maybe do what you can to increase airflow around the plant. So maybe pruning other plants nearby, because of course you don't want to prune your palm if you don't have to. Don't water the leaves in the morning. Keep the water off the leaves as much as you can if you have any signs of disease on the leaves.
Is this disease just ugly, or can it kill the plant?
I don't think it kills the plant, but it definitely will weaken it. Okay, I lied. It's primarily cosmetic. And it can be, sorry, phoenix palms will often have nutrient deficiencies. I think I showed this picture earlier with the potassium deficiency. The potassium deficiency is a serious problem on this plant and is probably going to cause more problems than disease on the palms that we grow in our area. Okay, Vince and I were talking before we started about a palm disease that had been kind of rampant in Corpus Christi a number of years back. This is the one I was thinking it was, the date palm lethal decline, but this was before I came. I don't think this is causing much of a problem right now.
It's still on the island. And because it's a plasmid, it's only contagious while it's alive, and then the plant's dead and the plasmid dies. But meanwhile, nobody's really making an effort to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what the vector is. So have fun.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's bad. So it's mostly affecting phoenix palms, all the phoenix species, queen palms, and the sable palmetto, which is the cabbage palm. And as Beth said, it kills the plants. So first symptom is the dropping of most or all of the fruit. On fruit, this should say fruit-bearing palms. And then the second symptom is the oldest leaves turn from green to reddish brown starting at the tips. So here's what the symptoms look like. And the central spear dies, which you can see, especially in this picture on the right. You can see that this, which is the spear that is going to develop into the next, that's supposed to be developing into the next leaf, is dying. And again, once that dies, the whole plant is going to die. Look at that thing. So complete death of the tree within about a year.
Yeah, they go pretty quickly, and so it's one of those things that you look at the tree and you're like, I think it might be sick, and before you know it, oh, my tree's dead. And meanwhile, whatever the vector is has spread it to 3 more trees, and
Yeah, that stinks.
And the only way to get rid of it is to burn the tree while, it's still symptomatic, and people are just playing what they should do in the waiting game of observe and monitor. But this is not an observe and monitor disease.
Yeah, and it's really hard to burn or pull out a tree that looks like, well, maybe it can survive. Yeah, it's hard to do that.
Exactly. You're like, well, maybe it'll pull through.
Yeah.
I hope.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this treatment with this oxytetracycline that is a preventative, but you have to keep treating it forever. So you would have to decide if it's worthwhile to you.
Yeah, overuse of antibiotics. Woohoo!
Right. Okay, so if you're having disease problems, you want to look for distribution. See if there's a pattern in the landscape. Maybe it's only in a certain area where the trees are clumped together, or maybe it's close to the house or close to where there has been some sort of disruption, like digging or, house remodeling. Oh,
Yeah,
my
fortunately,
internet.
one street on the island consulted me about this because they happen to know I was a master gardener, and I had just received training on this from a pathology advanced training. And I went, oh, I know what's wrong.
Yeah.
Most of them had their trees destroyed. Some of them replanted with other phoenix palms.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
one house put in all Canary Island date palms. I just went,
Not a good plan.
But the problem is the palms that just line the causeway on the island, like the main thoroughfare, are still randomly getting infected. So
dang.
yeah. I did give a heads up to the Sea Life Center because one of their trees was infected, but they also had a standing dead tree there that had gotten it and gone. And I'm like, well, it's dead now. It's not contagious anymore.
Yeah. Doesn't look good though.
I'll stop interrupting.
That's okay. You're fine. But looking for these things about looking for distribution or patterns is for any kind of disease, not specific to the lethal decline. And then if you're sending in a sample, this is the kind of thing that the lab is going to want to know, like the incidence. How much of the area or number of plants is affected? Is it like you've got eight palms and 5 of them are affected, but the infection is not that bad? It's like 10% of the leaf area is affected. That's the kind of information that's helpful in diagnosing a disease. There's a couple good websites for diseases also. This one from AgriLife, Plant Disease Handbook, and then you can look up palms, like here's that leaf smut. It tells you the pathogen, where it's going to be infected first, all that kind of thing. And you can find all different plants in here. You can see the topics here: food crops, landscaping, industry, and specialty. But Texas is not the leader, I'm sorry to say this, on palms. University of Florida and University of California are really more the leaders on palms. And I would say University of Florida is where I'd go first because their climate is more similar to ours. So both of these sites are great. And this PowerPoint, I guess, is posted where on your class site, so you'll have these links. So palms are unique. They are not regular trees. And damage is especially threatening because they do have that main shoot. And whereas other trees have a lot of branches, branches coming off of branches and all that, palms just have that one shoot, and once that goes, that's it. Here's some of the places I got my pictures from. And then palm trees in Hawaii, coconut palms.
Okay, I've got a question about coconut palms.
Okay.
I've been told that when they're mature, they lean over the water. Do they actually do that, or do they just kind of spread out because they're all clustered together?
Yeah, they don't necessarily lean over the water. That's probably more from prevailing winds. You can see that these ones are, they're pretty big. They can get bigger, but they're pretty mature and they're all pretty much standing up straight.
Okay, this misinformation I was given was about them just distributing their seeds, but okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't, no, I don't think that's true at all.
Okay.
Okay, here's that first website I mentioned. So it lists all these different palm diseases. So including normal abnormalities in palms, which are things that are not problems, but look weird. So people often, are concerned, like having some of the roots above ground. I'm sure you've all seen that. Anyway, there's a lot of different things, and this is just a great site. So are there any questions? Can you see the Texas tree planting guide? Beth?
No,
No? Okay.
we still see the palm problems from University of Florida.
Okay. Trying to be modern.
You might have to unshare one screen and share a different screen.
Okay.
Like stop screen sharing and then start it again.
Yes. Too bad I didn't open that one. I wanted to show you the Texas Forest Service website. So let me see if I can get back to that. I don't see it. I might have used up all my modernness.
It's okay, Ginger. I did notice you've grown a few gray hairs, and I'm sure I've given them all to you.
It's my dad's fault. He was very young. And of course, I'm very young. So, well, anyway, I would recommend going to texastreeplanting.tamu.edu because it's a great site for finding plants that'll grow in your area with your conditions, with the parameters that you're looking for. So that's all I have. If there's
I'll
no,
see if I can find a link to that and put it at least in the chat.
okay. It is in the presentation on the picture that shows the tree that's properly planted.
And paste. Send.
All right, excellent. Okay, well, I'm going to let you out 4.5 minutes early, I guess.
I've got a question real quick. It's Carrie.
Okay.
I know you were joking about bottle palms, but I have seen one bottle palm in Corpus Christi. Do those not really grow well here? Because they're beautiful.
They are beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, I really don't know the answer to that question. I don't know why they wouldn't do well.
It was a big one.
Oh, yeah.
Probably about maybe 30, 40 feet tall.
Oh,
And I
wow.
thought, wow, how come not everybody has those? And then I started looking. They're, you know, they're not as cold hardy as I'd like, but they're so pretty.
Y'all can talk now. You don't need to message.
But I was just wondering if anybody else had seen any or
Y'all
had
can go.
any
Yeah.
knowledge, because I'd really love some of those.
Yeah, I really think they should do fine. I had some of those in Honolulu, not real close to the ocean. I didn't live close, but you know, there's still salt in the air. They did great.
Oh, well, I might try it. Thank you.
I like your profile picture or whatever.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
I thought you were talking about the palm tree that they put bottles on, and I was really confused.
oh. Yeah, that was the one I showed, being silly, but yes, there really is a palm called bottle palm that has a fat trunk.
I just Googled it.
Oh,
Yeah, they stay green. They're so pretty.
There's a huge one at the South Texas Botanical Garden.
Yeah, I saw that one too. And those are the only two I've ever seen in Corpus.
yeah, they're neat plants.
Also the traveler's palm, which actually isn't really a palm, but also very pretty, but I've never seen any in Corpus.
It's
Except for it.
blacklisted.
I feel like
Blacklisted.
Yeah, it's a blacklisted palm right now from Florida.
The travelers?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
All right. Everybody sit tight because remember Vince has that poll.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much,
Thank
Ginger.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank
Okay, we're
you.
gonna do the poll on Wednesday's class, the web, the lab. Okay, so launch the poll here. Wait a second. Okay. Question number 1. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes,
Wednesday's lab, October the 21st, is supposed to be a tour of the Nueces Master Garden of Volunteer sites. Our presenter has a class that night, so we have to flex. What option would you prefer? Do the tour Saturday morning, 8 to 10 in a car caravan. Do a virtual tour via a video tour. Have a different lab presenter on Wednesday, Beth, or something else. Okay, your answers are completely anonymous. So if you will go ahead and select one of those answers, please, for question number 1. Let's see what we get.
I don't have mine. Mine isn't showing.
Everybody can see a poll,
Yes.
and can you select an answer?
Yes.
I
Okay.
heard one that couldn't.
I got 1 of 15 is viewing. Okay, I got 2 voted.
Okay.
2 of 15 have voted. And then the questions go on. If you do not actually, if we do an actual tour of the volunteer sites, would you prefer to start at 9 a.m. and complete by 11? Yes or no? If we do a virtual tour, do you prefer to upload to YouTube and or be done at a regular class time? And if we have a different lab than what's been suggested, Beth doing, do you want to do a different one or that? And if you have a different one, we're going to need to know what it is you want to do. Okay, so we got 5 of 15 have voted. Can everybody see the poll results? Or just?
No,
You can
can't
see,
see any results.
okay, go ahead and complete the poll.
I did.
Got 6
And all-
now completed.
All I see is your face.
Vince, this is Russell. Ann and I are going to both be out of town so that we have the same answer.
Okay,
I can't do Saturdays either.
got 7 of 15 have voted.
And it sounded like Margaret can't see the poll.
No, I finished it already. I don't see any results though.
Okay.
I haven't posted them yet.
Well, I misunderstood you. I thought you said, can you see the results?
Hey, the fourth question should have had an option of, I have no idea what I want.
I choose that one.
There was no option. It was either I know what I want and I don't know the presenter, or I know what I want and I know the presenter. It's like, no, wait a minute.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how to answer that one.
I was like, there should be a I have no idea option.
Yeah, I didn't know about the last two, so I wanted to do it Saturday.
Let's see, you got 16. I'm not voting.
I'm professional. I should turn off my camera. I'm tired.
11 of 14 have voted. Has everybody voted?
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
We'll get to it.
Did you vote, Vince?
No, I did not. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. Everybody's voted. I'm going to end the polling. Unless somebody says I'm not finished.
Yeah, I got to find out if I have to sign my presentation. I know I made it. I know it's out there somewhere, but I don't. It's
Okay.
definitely not
Ending the polling.
It's definitely not the current version of PowerPoint.
Okay. Share the results. All right, looking at question number 1. Wednesday's lab, October 21st, is supposed to be a tour of the volunteer sites. Our presenter has a class, so we have to flex. What option would you prefer? Do the tour 8:30 to 10? Do a virtual tour? We got 55% on that. A different lab on Wednesday, 27. So a virtual tour has come out on top on that question. Okay, if we do an actual tour of volunteer site, would you prefer to start at 9 a.m. and complete by 11 a.m.? Yes or no? The yeses have it.
There was no option to start at 11 and finish at 3.
No, because we want to be done before midday. We want to run over lunch. Okay, if we do a virtual tour, do you prefer it be uploaded to YouTube or be presented at a regular class meeting? Upload to YouTube and then email Kevin, myself, and Beth. You have to put all 3 in there that you have viewed the video has come out ahead. If you prefer a different lab presentation, what would you like? Have an idea, but don't have a presenter. Okay, so it looks like you guys would prefer to have a virtual tour over
And they
everything.
want to make Kevin do all the work.
Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna send this to Kevin, because he asked me to do a survey. And we'll tell him that you guys prefer to have a virtual tour, upload it to YouTube, and you guys watch it and then let us know you viewed it to get your credit. That work for everybody?
Yes.
Works for me.
How are we going to let Kevin, Vince, and Beth know that we viewed it after we've seen it?
By email.
I could do that without looking at it, but yeah, okay.
Well, if you're a dishonest person, you would do that. But we know we have no dishonest people in this group. And everybody's going to watch the virtual tour before they say I did.
And board.
Okay, so I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to send you, after I send this to Kevin and get his okay, we're going to, because this is going to put the onus on him to go out and video these sites or put together a PowerPoint on these sites. I'll put that link in an email to everybody and copy myself, Kevin, and Beth. And then all you have to do is a reply to all, and we'll get it. And then we'll mark you off the list. I will also send the PowerPoint for tonight's presentation to everybody that was in attendance tonight. For those that are not in attendance, they'll have to go to the VMS and get it from there. I also uploaded the bugguide.net so that you can get to the home page and you click on the link and try that out that she recommended. Any questions? Okay.
What is the airspeed, velocity, and level leaving slow?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Get back to you guys tomorrow.